The name she had me saved as in her phone was Farang 2. I know this because I saw the notification arrive on her screen when my own message came through. One Tuesday morning in her apartment, while she was in the shower and her phone was on the kitchen table and I was making coffee. The notification showed the sender name as it appears in her contacts, which was Farang 2. And I registered this information with the specific clarity that a systems analyst registers unexpected data. The data is what it is. The data is significant. The data requires a response. The response I chose, in that specific moment, was to finish making the coffee. I want to account for that choice carefully, because it is the choice that produced the subsequent 3 months, and the 3 months are the part of this story that I am least comfortable telling, and most committed to telling accurately. My name is Colin. I am 65 years old, I am from Bristol, and I spent 30 years as a systems analyst for a financial services company before taking early retirement at 62. Systems analysis is, in its simplest description, the practice of looking at how a process actually works rather than how it is supposed to work, and identifying the gaps between the two, and either closing the gaps or documenting why they exist. Let me give you the 30 years, because the 30 years explain the 3 months. A systems analyst who works in financial services develops a specific cognitive orientation. The world is processes, and processes have logic, and the logic is discoverable, and the discovering is the job. What this produces in personal life is a man who is very good at understanding how things work when processes are explicit and codable, and who has specific limitations when processes are implicit, interpersonal, and designed to resist examination. I had the tools to see what Farang 2 meant. I chose not to apply them. A systems analyst who has the tools and chooses not to apply them has a reason not to look, and my reason was that I was 63 and I was in Pattaya, and I had decided that the enjoyment did not require the analysis. I came to Pattaya in 2021 for reasons I am going to describe, and I met Fawn in the 3rd month, and I want to describe how I met her, because the how matters for what happened subsequently, which is that I met her in a context that should have given me sufficient information to manage my expectations correctly, and I managed them incorrectly anyway, and the incorrect management is the story. I came to Pattaya because a man I had worked with for 11 years in the Bristol office, a man named Gary who had retired 2 years before me and who had been in Thailand since 2019, told me Pattaya was a city that a systems analyst would find interesting because the systems of it were visible in a way that most cities' systems were not. Let me give you why I retired and came to Thailand. Because the reasons are relevant, and the account should not start in Pattaya without the context that produced the arrival in Pattaya. I retired at 62, 2 years earlier than I had planned, because the financial services company had been through a reorganization that had reduced the function of senior systems analysts in a specific way. The systems they needed analyzed were increasingly the systems of machine learning implementations rather than the systems of human financial processes, and I had spent 30 years on the human financial processes, and the machine learning was a field I had not built my expertise in, and the reorganization made the boundary between those two things visible. I accepted a package. The package was adequate. I had a flat in Bristol that I sold. The flat produced, in Bristol's 2021 market, a sum that I was gratified by and that I will not specify here. And I had savings and a pension and a decision that I was not going to spend the retirement in Bristol. Gary's messages from Thailand had been appearing on my phone for 2 years, and the messages described a life that was warm in every sense of the word, and in October 2021 I booked the flight. I came to Pattaya because a man I had worked with for 11 years in the Bristol office, a man named Gary who had retired 2 years before me and who had been in Thailand since 2019, told me Pattaya was a city that a systems analyst would find interesting because the systems of it were visible in a way that most cities' systems were not. I did not fully understand this at the time, and I understand it completely now. Pattaya's economy has specific visible systems: the tourism economy, the expat economy, the hospitality and entertainment economy, and the systems operate with a transparency that a city with more complex layers of social infrastructure does not produce. You can see how things work in Pattaya in a way that you cannot see how things work in London or Bristol, because in Pattaya, the mechanisms are not concealed by the social conventions that conceal them in English cities. Gary was describing this as an asset. It is an asset. It is also, in the specific context of romantic relationships, the thing that I had the information to see and chose not to look at directly, and the choosing not to look is the gap that Farang 2 represents. I met Fawn in September 2021 at a bar on Walking Street. I am not going to describe this as anything other than what it was. A bar on Walking Street, which is Pattaya's tourist entertainment district, and a woman who was working in that bar, and an initial conversation that had the warmth of a conversation between two people who find each other interesting, which I did, and which she was skilled at producing. I want to give you what I knew in September 2021, because the knowing is relevant and the account should be honest about it. I knew the context of the bar and the context of the woman's work in the bar. I knew, in the abstract, what this context implies about the structure of the relationships that bar workers in this industry maintain with Western men. Gary had described this context in general terms in the months before I arrived, without discussing Fawn specifically, because Gary did not know I was going to meet Fawn. What Gary had said was, the women who work in these bars are professionals. They manage multiple relationships. The relationships are warm and genuine within their specific terms, and the terms include financial support as a component. He had said this in the way that a man who has been in Pattaya for 2 years says things about Pattaya to a man who has not yet been there, with the authority of experience and the assumption that the listening man will use the information as information and not as a mandate to find the exception. I used it as a mandate to find the exception. The exception, I decided in September 2021, was Fawn. The decision was available to me. I made it. Farang 2 is the data point that indicates how well the exception-finding strategy performed. I met Fawn in September 2021 at a bar on Walking Street. I am not going to describe this as anything other than what it was. A bar on Walking Street, which is Pattaya's tourist entertainment district, and a woman who was working in that bar, and an initial conversation that had the warmth of a conversation between two people who find each other interesting, which I did, and which she was skilled at producing. I want to give you what I knew in September 2021, because the knowing is relevant and the account should be honest about it. I want to give you the level of my knowledge of the Pattaya context at that point, because the knowledge was specific, and the account of what I did with it is the part that requires accounting. Gary had given me approximately 2 hours of briefing in the week before my departure from Bristol, over several WhatsApp calls in which he described the city's geography, its accommodation options, its social structure, and the specific economy of the entertainment district. In this briefing he had said, specifically, the bar workers manage multiple men simultaneously. This is the standard operating model. The relationships they provide are genuine within their specific terms, and the specific terms include financial support as a structural component. I took notes during this briefing, which is a habit from systems analysis. When someone with operational knowledge describes a system, you take notes. I had the notes. I arrived in Pattaya with the notes. In month 3 of my arrival, I met Fawn and decided, in the specific way I have described, that the notes did not apply to Fawn. They applied to Fawn with the precision of a systems document that accurately describes the system it was written about. I met Fawn in September 2021 at a bar on Walking Street. I am not going to describe this as anything other than what it was. I want to be accurate. Fawn was not performing interest she did not have. She was a person who found me interesting in the specific way that a 30-year-old woman who is managing multiple men finds a 63-year-old British systems analyst interesting, which is, he is organized, he is not dramatic, he will be easy to manage, and he has a pension that makes him a reliable source of income. I want to elaborate on the easy-to-manage component, because it is the component that is most specifically generated by my professional background. A systems analyst who is retired and relaxed, and not requiring drama from his personal life, is, from the perspective of a professional in the Pattaya entertainment hospitality industry, a low-maintenance client. Low maintenance means he transfers the monthly support without drama. He does not make demands about exclusivity. He does not check up. He does not arrive without arrangement. He does not read the contact name on the notification with the same alarm that a man with different professional formation might read it, because reading data and reaching conclusions is his professional skill, and he has decided not to apply it. A low-maintenance Farang 2 is a Farang 2 who keeps the arrangement operational without disrupting it. I was, for 3 months after the Tuesday morning, the ideal low-maintenance Farang 2. This is not cynicism. It is systems analysis applied to my own situation retrospectively. And the analysis is accurate, and the accuracy is what makes the Farang 2 discovery not a betrayal in the conventional sense, but a data point that I had sufficient context to have anticipated and did not allow myself to anticipate, because the anticipating would have been, I decided in September 2021, an unnecessarily suspicious approach to a person I found genuinely pleasant. Fawn is 34 now. She was 30 when I met her. She had been working in the bar for 3 years before our meeting, and she was professional at it in the specific way of a person who has developed a professional skill and who applies it with the efficiency of experience. The professional skill was the management of the relationship between a Western man and herself in a way that provided him with the specific experience of having a genuine connection with a genuine person, which, to be clear, is not false advertising, because the connection was genuine within its own terms, while also managing the financial side of the connection in a way that maximized the income it produced. She was not running a fraud. She was managing a portfolio. The distinction matters to me because I spent 30 years managing financial systems, and the difference between a fraud and an optimized portfolio is the difference between someone hiding information and someone not volunteering information that you did not ask for. The portfolio management does not conceal the fact of multiple relationships. It simply does not disclose it. If you want to know, you can ask. The asking will produce either a direct answer or a response that is itself information. The portfolio manager does not lie. They manage. The managed do not ask. They enjoy. The system requires both parties to play their roles, and both parties in this case played their roles correctly until the Tuesday morning, at which point the contact name disclosure created an information asymmetry that I chose to maintain for 3 months and then chose to close. I did not ask. She did not volunteer. The system ran. Let me describe the system, because the system is the story, and I want to give it to you precisely. Over the 16 months between September 2021 and the Farang 2 morning in January 2023, I transferred approximately 480,000 baht to Fawn in various forms. Monthly support of 15,000 baht, contributions to specific requests that arrived at roughly 6-week intervals, and that included her mother's health, her sister's school fees, and once, memorably, a flood in her hometown in the northeast that required a family contribution to rebuilding costs. Let me give you the 16 months as they felt from inside them, because the inside feeling is important, and the account should include it. The Thursday evenings were the center. I would arrive at her apartment near Theprasit Road at approximately 6, and she would have cooked something. Thai home cooking that she was genuinely good at, in the specific way of a person who grew up cooking rather than learning it. And we would eat and talk and watch something on her laptop. And the evenings had the texture of domestic warmth that a man who has lived alone in Jomtien since October 2021 finds useful. I want to be accurate about the word useful, because it is not the same as romantic, and it is not the same as false, and it is the word that best describes what the 16 months provided at the level I was willing to examine. Useful. She was good company. She cooked well. She was interested in what I said with the professional interest of a person whose professional skill includes being interested in what men say, and the professional interest was indistinguishable, in the immediate moment, from genuine interest, and I do not know with certainty that it was not also genuine interest, and I am going to leave the epistemic status of her interest at that level of ambiguity because raising it above that level requires certainty I do not have. Over the 16 months between September 2021 and the Farang 2 morning in January 2023, I transferred approximately 480,000 baht to Fawn in various forms. The monthly support of 15,000 baht represented approximately 30% of my monthly pension. At the exchange rates of that period, I was aware, in the abstract, that Fawn's work context suggested she managed relationships with multiple men. I did not examine this awareness with any rigor. A systems analyst who does not examine available evidence with rigor is a systems analyst who has decided, for reasons he is not accounting for, that the evidence is not interesting. I had decided the evidence was not interesting. The Farang 2 morning. It was a Tuesday. Her apartment near Thepprasit Road, the apartment I had been visiting for 16 months, which I knew well enough to make coffee without asking where anything was. Let me give you the specific 4 seconds, because the 4 seconds are where the analysis happened, and the analysis is the record. The phone was a Samsung. The screen lit up with the incoming message notification, which displayed the sender name from her contacts as the identifier. The display showed a small envelope icon, then the sender name, then the beginning of the message preview. The sender name was Farang 2. The message preview was, "Do you want coffee?" which was the message I had sent. I read the sender name, and I processed it with the professional reflex that has defined my working life, which is, this is data. The data is significant. The data requires a response. The response I chose was to finish making the coffee. The 4 seconds between reading Farang 2 and continuing to make the coffee were the 4 seconds in which I decided that the maintenance ticket would not be opened immediately. And the reason I can describe those 4 seconds with precision is that I have replayed them approximately 50 times in the 18 months since the Tuesday morning, and the replaying has not produced a different account, and the account is, I saw it, I understood it, I made the coffee. The Farang 2 morning. It was a Tuesday. Her apartment near Thepprasit Road, the apartment I had been visiting for 16 months, which I knew well enough to make coffee without asking where anything was. She was in the shower. The phone was on the table. My message arrived. I had sent it 30 seconds earlier from the bed, asking whether she wanted coffee, and the notification surfaced, from Colin, displayed on her lock screen, and the contact name under the message preview said, Farang 2. I looked at this for approximately 4 seconds. I understood it completely. I made the coffee. I brought her a cup when she came out of the shower. We had breakfast. I went back to the Jomtien apartment and I sat with the information for 3 months. I want to account for the 3 months carefully, because the 3 months are not comfortable to describe and they are the most instructive part of this account. Let me give you the 3 months in more honest detail than I gave them above. Week 1. I went back to the Jomtien apartment and I sat with the Farang 2 information, and I ran through the alternative explanations. Corrupted contact import, accidental autofill, a nickname I had given her that had been modified, and I found all of them implausible. A systems analyst who finds the alternative explanations implausible and who continues to the Thursday evening anyway is a systems analyst who has made a decision, and the decision was, I am going to continue because the continuation is better than the alternative. This is an honest description of the decision. The alternative was to have a conversation with Fawn that would require me to acknowledge what I had seen, which would require her to respond to it, and the response would confirm it, and the confirmation would end something that I found, at the individual Thursday evening level, valuable. I was 63 years old. The Thursday evenings were good evenings. The continuation was better. Week 6. I had been in the relationship for another 6 weeks, and the relationship was the same relationship, and I had not raised what I had seen, and I had filed it under the specific mental category I use for information that is available and not acted on, which in professional life is called deferred maintenance. The deferred maintenance was the Farang 2 information. I did not open the maintenance ticket. The Thursday evenings continued. Month 3. The April Thursday, when the phone notification from Farang 1 surfaced, which closed the deferred maintenance file and opened the actual maintenance file, which was the 4-minute conversation, which was the ending. I want to account for the 3 months carefully, because the 3 months are not comfortable to describe, and they are the most instructive part of this account. What I did in the 3 months was continue the relationship, continue the monthly support, and make no reference to what I had seen. I did this for reasons that I have been analyzing since, and the reasons, in the order of their persuasiveness, were these. First, I was not certain that Farang 2 was what I thought it was. There are interpretations of the contact name that are less alarming than "she has numbered her Western men." Perhaps the previous phone had imported a corrupted contact name. Perhaps it was a nickname I had given her that had auto-filled incorrectly. Perhaps she had a specific reason to number her contacts that had nothing to do with the system I was imagining. I examined each of these interpretations in the first 2 weeks and found all of them implausible. I continued the relationship anyway. Second, I was, in January 2023, approximately 6 weeks before the renewal of my UK pension tax registration that I had been managing remotely, and the administrative complexity of the period made disruption feel counterproductive. Third, the continuation of the relationship was, in January 2023, the default state, and changing the default required a decision, and I had not decided. The decision arrived in April, in the form of an incident that I am going to describe because it is relevant, and because omitting it would be a form of dishonesty. Let me give you the April Thursday more fully, because the April Thursday closed the 3-month deferral, and I want to account for the closing precisely. I was at Fawn's apartment at approximately 7:30 in the evening. We had finished eating. Fawn was washing up. Her phone was on the counter near the kitchen, which is adjacent to the living area where I was sitting, and her phone screen lit up. I could see the notification from where I was sitting. The notification was from a contact named Farang 1. I did not see the message content. I saw the contact name. I looked at the notification, and I looked at Fawn at the sink, and I experienced the specific sensation that a systems analyst experiences when 2 pieces of data that have been filed separately resolve into a single coherent system. The Tuesday morning Farang 2, the Thursday evening Farang 1, the 16 months of Thursday evenings, the 480,000 baht of monthly support. The system was visible. The maintenance ticket was open. I said nothing that evening. The following day I transferred the final monthly support payment. The month after I did not transfer it, and the sequence that followed was the 4-minute conversation I have described, and the 4-minute conversation was the most calibrated professional exchange I have had since I took early retirement, and both sides of it were competent, and the competence of both sides is what makes it the most satisfying element of this otherwise instructive story. We both understood the situation, we both communicated within it accurately, and the communication closed the file correctly. The decision arrived in April, in the form of an incident that I am going to describe because it is relevant and because omitting it would be a form of dishonesty. I was at Fawn's apartment on a Thursday evening, and her phone, which was on the kitchen table again, lit up with a message notification. The sender was Farang 1. I saw it clearly. I did not see the content. I registered the sender and I said nothing, and we had dinner, and I went back to Jomtien, and the following day I transferred the final monthly support payment, and the month after I did not transfer it. And Fawn asked about the transfer and I said I had decided to stop for the moment. And she said why? And I said I had been thinking about the arrangement and I thought it had run its course. And she said, "You saw something." I said I had seen enough. She said, "I should have changed the names." I said, "Yes." That was the conversation. It lasted approximately 4 minutes. It was the most precisely calibrated conversation I have had in 4 years of living in Thailand, and the calibration was on both sides. I want to tell you what I now know that I did not know in September 2021, because knowing it then would have produced a different account, and knowing it now might produce a different outcome for you if you are in a comparable situation. I want to add something about the Farang 1, Farang 2 naming system specifically, because it is the specific detail of this story that will be most useful to men who are in or considering the specific context I was in, and because the detail is widely known among long-term Pattaya residents and not widely known among new arrivals. The contact numbering system is one of several organizational approaches that professional hospitality workers in Pattaya use to manage multiple concurrent relationships. Other approaches include a dedicated second phone for the Thai language contacts that a Western man is unlikely to encounter. Separate line accounts for different categories of relationship. The use of the man's nationality or physical characteristic as the contact name, Farang, German, Fat 1. I learned this last one from Gary, who had been called it in a previous situation, and who relayed it without visible distress, because Gary has been in Pattaya for 5 years, and distress about this category of information has a shelf life. The numbering system is the least concealed of these approaches, because it requires only that the man not see the phone's contact display for the incoming notifications, which is a condition that breaks down whenever the man is in proximity to the phone and a message arrives. The Farang 2 morning was the breakdown of the condition. The condition had held for 16 months. One Tuesday morning it did not hold, and the systems analyst for whom the visible evidence is the operative instrument saw the visible evidence and registered it, and decided to continue for 3 months, which is the specific sequence I have already described, and which I will not re-describe except to say, I know. I want to tell you what I now know that I did not know in September 2021, because knowing it then would have produced a different account. What I know, the numbering of contacts, Farang 1, Farang 2, and presumably Farang 3 and beyond, is a system for managing multiple concurrent relationships that is common enough in the specific niche of Pattaya entertainment hospitality to have a name in the expat community, which I eventually learned from Gary, who had known about it for 3 years, and who did not tell me about it when I met Fawn, because, as he explained when I told him what I had found, he had not thought it was his place to tell me, and he had assumed I knew. I had not known. I now know. The knowledge is available, and it has the specific character of knowledge that is available to anyone who asks, in the right forums, the right questions, and that is not asked because the asking would require acknowledging what the asking is about, and the acknowledging is the thing that the situation is designed to prevent. What I did not lose in this situation is also worth naming, because the naming is honest, and because the loss narrative is the only narrative available if you do not name what was not lost. I want to be specific about the not lost, because the not lost is what allows me to describe this situation without the specific bitterness that men in similar situations sometimes produce, and the absence of bitterness is not equanimity I have achieved, but accuracy I am reporting. What I did not lose a genuine exclusive relationship that turned out to be not genuine and not exclusive, because I did not have a genuine exclusive relationship. I had a relationship that was professional in its origin and warm in its execution and financial in its foundation, and I had chosen to experience it as something that provided the texture of a genuine exclusive relationship without the examination that would have established whether it was one. I had made the choice. The choice was mine. The 480,000 baht was the cost of the choice, and the choice produced 16 months of Thursday evenings and home cooking and company and warmth and the instruction that I was Farang 2. And I consider the 16 months to have been worth the amount I paid for them, which is a calculation that only I can make and which I have made. What I did not lose in this situation is also worth naming, because the naming is honest and because the loss narrative is the only narrative available if you do not name what was not lost. I did not lose a relationship that had been what I believed it was and that turned out to be something else. I had a relationship that was, within its own system, functional and warm and professionally managed, and which I entered with the information available to identify it for what it was, and which I chose to experience as something different from what it was, and the choice was mine. The 480,000 baht is the cost of the choice. The choice produced 16 months of a specific kind of company in Pattaya that I found genuinely useful for the specific reason that it provided the warmth and regularity of a domestic arrangement without the demands of a genuine partnership, and I was aware of this at the time, even if I was aware of it in the selective way that a man is aware of something he has decided not to examine. The cost was approximately 29,000 baht a month for 16 months, which converts to approximately 700 Australian dollars a month, or 600 US dollars or 500 pounds, depending on the currency you are thinking in. And for that amount, in Pattaya, in the period 2021 to 2023, I received company, warmth, dinner on most Thursday evenings, the specific company of a woman who is genuinely good at the specific professional service she was providing, and the instruction that I was Farang too, and that there were at least two of us, and the instruction was accurate, and probably the most useful thing the 16 months produced. I am in Jomtien now, at a coffee place near the apartment I have rented for 2.5 years, which has a view of the canal and which costs 12,000 baht a month, and which is sufficient. Let me give you the Jomtien daily life, because the daily life is the context and the context makes the story. I wake at 6. I make coffee in the apartment and look at the canal, which is green in the mornings in the way of Thai canals in residential areas. Not the decorative canal of a tourism brochure, but the working canal of a neighborhood, with the long-tail boats going past at 7 and the market boats on Wednesday mornings, and the specific quality of light that a canal produces by reflecting it from below. I have been looking at this canal for 2.5 years, and I am still interested in it, which is the criterion I now apply to things in Pattaya. Am I still interested after 2.5 years? The canal passes the test. The coffee place near the apartment passes the test. The specific route I walk between the apartment and the Jomtien beach at 7 in the morning, on the days I walk it, passes the test. These are the things that the retirement has settled into, and the settling is good, and the fawn chapter was inside it, and it is over, and the canal and the coffee and the walk are still there. I am in Jomtien now, at a coffee place near the apartment I have rented for 2.5 years, which has a view of the canal and which costs 12,000 baht a month, and which is sufficient. I want to add something about Gary and what Gary knows, because Gary is a character in this story who has been present throughout and who has not been properly accounted for. Gary came for coffee last week, and I told him this account in approximately the form I have told you. Let me give you what Gary knows, because Gary's knowledge is the knowledge that was available to me in September 2021 and that I did not use, and its availability and my non-use of it is the instructive element. Gary has been in Pattaya for 5 years. He has been through 3 significant relationships during that time, each of which taught him something about the operating system of the Pattaya entertainment economy that the previous one had not. The third relationship ended when his partner's other man arrived unexpectedly at her apartment on a Sunday morning, which is a discovery mechanism that is considerably less subtle than the contact name notification, and which Gary describes with the equanimity of a man who has processed the sequence. From these 3 relationships, Gary has developed a specific knowledge base. He knows which establishments in Pattaya employ the numbering system, which employ the nationality naming system, and which are managed by women who maintain a single high-value relationship at a time, and whose financial requirements are correspondingly higher per man. He did not share this knowledge base with me in October 2021, because, as he explained, he assumed I would ask if I wanted to know, and I had not asked. I had not asked because asking would have required me to treat the fawn situation as a system to be analyzed rather than a relationship to be enjoyed, and I had decided to enjoy it. This is the decision I would revise if I were giving advice to the man who arrived in Pattaya in October 2021, which is, ask Gary what he knows before you start. I want to add something about Gary and what Gary knows, because Gary is a character in this story who has been present throughout and who has not been properly accounted for. Gary came for coffee last week and I told him this account in approximately the form I have told you, and he listened and said, You were Farang too. I said yes. He said, the number tells you she had enough to need a system. I said I understood that. He said, do you know what happened to Farang 1? I said I did not. He said, he probably had the same conversation you did, about 6 months before you did. I said that was my assessment also. He said, then you were both managed correctly. I said, we were both managed correctly. Then he said something that I have been thinking about since. The difference between you and Farang 1 is probably not the Farang 2 discovery. It's what came before it. Farang 1 probably didn't have the notes. I said, I had the notes. He said, then the difference between you and Farang 1 is that you're not surprised, not angry, not a victim. You had the notes, and you chose not to use them, and then you used them when you needed to, and then you left. That's the sequence. Farang 1 probably felt betrayed. You feel instructed. I said, instructed is the right word. He said, then keep the instruction and leave the rest. I said I intended to. He said, good. Then we talked about something else. I said, we were both managed correctly. He said, the difference between you and Farang 1 is probably that Farang 1 is still angry about it. I said, I had the notes from your briefing, and I chose not to use them. The anger would require me to not have had the notes. He said, that's the systems analyst answer. I said it is. We had our coffees. The canal was where it is at 9 in the morning, which is where it has been for 2.5 years, and I have decided to keep the Farang 2 information in the category of things that were instructive, and to stop examining it for additional lessons, because the lesson has been extracted, and the examination has run its course, in the same way that the arrangement ran its course. And I am going to have coffee at this table in approximately 3 weeks, and Gary will be there, and the canal will be there, and the not bitter is what the notes produce when you understand why you didn't use them, and both versions of the not bitter are preferable to the alternative, and the alternative is not where I am, and I consider the course to have been worth the running. Let me add what the course taught me that might be useful to the man who is in October 2021, reading this before his flight, or in month 3 of his arrival, considering whether the exception applies to the person he has met. The exception never applies. This is the lesson. Let me state it in the specific language that 30 years of systems work produces, because the language is precise and the precision is useful. The information about the operating system of the Pattaya bar economy was available to me before I arrived. The information was accurate. The information would have produced a different set of expectations if I had applied it. I did not apply it because the application would have required me to engage with Fawn as the system rather than as the person, and I had decided to engage with the person. The decision to engage with the person is not the error. The error is the decision to engage with the person without also tracking the system. The system and the person are both real. They can both be true simultaneously. Tracking the system does not prevent you from enjoying the person. It simply means you know which system you are inside, and what the system costs, and what its parameters are, and what the exit looks like. I know all of these things now. I knew them in October 2021 in the abstract, and chose not to apply them. The application is what Farang 2 documents. The documentation is what this recording provides. The exception never applies. This is the lesson. Not because there are no exceptions. There are people who have begun in the bar context and arrived at a genuinely exclusive relationship. I know one such person. Gary has described him. He has been with the same woman for 7 years, and she left the bar in the first month and has been working in hotel management since. The exception exists. The exception is not you, statistically, and the correct approach is not to determine whether you are the exception before committing 16 months and 480,000 baht. The correct approach is, ask the specific questions early. Not the general question, not, are you seeing other men, but the specific questions that establish the system. How many men are you currently supporting you? What is the financial arrangement with each of them? What would the arrangement with me look like, and what does it include, And what does it exclude? These questions are uncomfortable to ask. They are available to ask. They will produce either a clear answer that establishes the terms honestly, or a discomfort in the person being asked, that is itself information. I did not ask them. I had the notes from Gary's briefing, and I did not ask them. The notes are in a WhatsApp message that I can find in approximately 30 seconds. I did not use them. The not using is what Farang 2 documents. I consider the course to have been worth the running. I wake at 6. I make coffee in the apartment. I look at the canal. The long-tail boats go past at 7. The market boats come on Wednesday mornings. I walk to Jomtien Beach when the morning allows it. This is the retirement. The fawn chapter was inside it and is over. The canal and the coffee and the walk are still there. The Farang 2 notification is still on the phone, in the message history, under the archived thread. I could search for it. I have not searched for it. The archive is the correct location for data from completed processes, and the process is complete, and the data is where data belongs when the analysis has been done, and the conclusions have been drawn, and the maintenance ticket has been closed, and the system has been documented, and the documentation is accurate and sufficient and filed. The file is closed. The system has been documented. The documentation is this recording, and the recording is the filed report, and I consider it accurate, and I consider the course to have been worth the running, and I am going to have coffee with Gary in approximately 3 weeks, and the canal will still be the canal, and Gary will tell me something about Pattaya that I did not know, and I will take notes, and this time I will use them, and the using of them is what the 30 years of systems work eventually produces, and it is what I have, and it is sufficient.